right, let's go to item 8B, which is Louisiana Station Area Framework Plan and Design Guidelines. I think we're going to lump some of these together, aren't we, Kevin? Not for a vote, but you're going to talk about them all kind of in one?
No.
Is there
We're
gonna be
going to
some
talk about
overlap
them in, from the beginning, is what it says on the
Okay.
PowerPoint presentation.
I don't like the sound of music.
We're going to talk about them initially all together and then take them individually
Okay.
with their own presentations. I think everybody's aware over the last, I don't know how long, months, years, something like that, we've had a whole series of actions in planning and zoning, redevelopment, consideration of light rail plans, kind of an endless parade of things related to the 3 station areas in St. Louis Park. And we have 3 items related to the station areas, the light rail station areas. I suppose maybe this project has gotten so familiar to us that we don't need to note that we're talking about light rail stations anymore, but I didn't put it on the title slide here. And what I wanted to do, since we have 3 items tonight, is kind of give a brief little overview of how they fit together to kind of help make sense out of all the different things that are going on simultaneously or have been going for the last few years and will continue to happen. And as soon as you can tell I do these PowerPoint presentations all the time. There we go. Kind of as a context for this is that in general, when we're dealing with planning in the city and zoning activities in the city, you can kind of look at it as kind of going from the broad strokes to the specifics. So our comprehensive plan is our most comprehensive and largest document. It really deals with everything from soups to nuts in some ways, but that's also the repository for our goals and our visions for the community as a whole, and is kind of the basis for most of the rest of the planning we do in the community. As we move through to, we do sub-area plans, we do zoning, we do site plans, those things move from the more general, make this work, from the more general to the more specific. The sub-area plans are things like our neighborhood plans, in this case, our station area plans. They are things like the planning that we're looking to do for the south side of Excelsior Boulevard. There's any number of areas that were largely identified in the comp plan when we last updated it as places that need special attention. They're sub-areas of the community. When we look to how do we implement those things, as we look at our zoning ordinance as primary tool, as well as other things, other special codes in some cases, specific capital improvement projects, that type of thing, again, moving toward the more specific. In particular, our zoning code really involves 2 things. One is literally the words, the ordinance itself that has the districts identified, and then there's the case of taking the code and applying it to specific locations, which is why we talk about zoning maps. When we get to individual projects, and in some cases planning for specific sites, you get down to the smallest scale. Whoops, wrong direction here. All right, now don't get freaked out by this. I was trying to make this simple. I'm not sure I did, but isn't it colorful?
It's lovely.
So tonight we're really dealing with these 3 components, all related to our stationary planning in one form or another. And again, we have those 4 components I showed in the last slide, from the largest scale, both geographically and largest scale in terms of goals and visions at the top of the chart here, comprehensive plan, down to the more specific, the most specific, individual site plans and projects. And in between, we have kind of our sub-areas, like our neighborhood plans and stationary plans, and we have our zoning tools, 2 pieces of which we have as agenda items tonight. This also starts to look at the geographic subsections. So if you look at our comprehensive plan, our most recent comprehensive plan, you will see that we identified, among the many things, but three things, very big important pieces, which were that we were going to do sub-area plans for each of the stations, Wooddale, Louisiana, and Beltline. And indeed, that's what we've been doing. If you look at the sub-area level of work that's happened, some of this happened quite a long time ago. We are still really guiding how things happen at Wooddale station area based on the Elmwood study that was done in 2003. We've made some modifications to what that was, but that still is the basic guiding light for what happens in that immediate area. We didn't have that kind of work for Beltline in 2012. We did the design guidelines for the Beltline station. We also did some ancillary studies that we haven't shown on this chart. Figured we didn't need anything more on the chart. Things like the circulation study for the Beltline area, and some looks at individual sites. For Louisiana station was another station area where we didn't have a specific plan prior to now, and that, since it's kind of this greenish yellow color, is one of the items on tonight's agenda, which is the framework and design guidelines for the Louisiana station. When you look at these plans, they're very helpful in guiding what we do, but in terms of actually making them truly usable tools, we need implementation tools. And the key land use implementation tool is the zoning ordinance. And we have created a new zoning district earlier, probably over a year ago now, I think we established the district, called, we just initials here, BP for Business Park, which was intended as kind of a transition from the heavy industrial kinds of uses we have in many of our station areas toward things that were more of a mixed use, more of a service-oriented, provide more opportunities for office and even some retail service, possibly even housing under certain conditions. So we created this new zoning district, and we've identified spots for applying that district, and that's the action that we'll have before you tonight here shortly. Meanwhile, we've also had an opportunity, because of some grant money that we have from the Met Council, to explore what we're referring to as kind of a potential zoning tool, which is, I promised I wouldn't call this the Facebook code. It's the form-based code, which is a form of approach to zoning that focuses much more on issues of design and physical appearance than it does on use. Traditional zoning focuses first on the use and secondarily on what's it going to look like, what's the public realm going to be like, how things are going to be laid out on the site. The form-based code takes the reverse. They have very many similar aspects. Ultimately, you get much the same place if you do everything right, but we think this is a approach for our stations that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about trying to create a homogeneous district. So that is another item on tonight's agenda. Ultimately, all of these tools lead to the stuff that's at the bottom. Site plans, projects, new developments. One of the things that isn't on tonight's agenda, but some of you have been participating in, is the LISC Development Initiative for the Wooddale site, basically at the property owned by the county along with the city. And the issue there was getting down to very specifics. What do you actually do with that individual site? And there will be many more of those kinds of activities coming in the future as we get specific projects. We're talking about the possibility of a joint development on the Beltline station area that would fill in one of these boxes. But tonight we're really focused on these three pieces of this big puzzle. One is the guidelines for Louisiana, which will be the first item up after I'm done speaking here. The second is applying the new zoning district to some of the industrial properties in St. Louis Park that starts the transition to a more transit-friendly kinds of development. And the third item on tonight is the contract with the consultant for developing a new possible approach for us to use for zoning in our Wooddale, or excuse me, in all of our light rail station areas. So now I've got you totally confused. I think I'd like to turn it over to Sean. Talk about the Louisiana Station.
All right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for the introduction, Kevin. Tonight, we're bringing to you the Louisiana Station Area Framework and Design Guidelines. This was brought to the City Council in September. We brought a lot of the broader vision, goals, and ideas to you previously. You'll see some, hopefully it jogs your memory as you see the presentation tonight on the report. But we've also added a lot of detail into that and with additional input from the public. And I'll let the consultant, Brian Hargis from Hoisington Kogler, kind of go through that. I do want to at least mention that this was also funded by a grant from Metropolitan Council, 75% of it under Livable Communities demonstration account grant. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Hargis. He'll provide about a 15-minute presentation, and then there'll be time for questions. Thanks.
Right here. Great. Excellent. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, those in attendance. I'm Brian Hargis with Hoisington Kogler Group. I was project manager for the Framework and Design Guidelines piece. I've got about a 15-minute presentation tonight. Quite a bit of content to cover. I'm going to give you an overview of a lot of it. We can always come back for questions at the end. But the crux of the presentation is going to focus on the bottom two elements here, the framework plans and the design guidelines. I'll just give a little bit of an overview on the project to start. We had an advisory committee as a part of this, a collection of business owners, residents in the surrounding 5 neighborhoods that met 5 times through June through November to help kind of guide and shepherd the process going forward. We had a community open house that about 20 to 30 attended in September of this year to review some of the draft framework plans and elements that you saw at a work session earlier in the year. And then we had some more detailed stakeholder interviews with folks like the Watershed District, the Meadowbrook neighborhood to the south of the creek, the Park Nicollet Methodist Hospital folks, and other surrounding businesses in that area to help us better understand what is happening in the area. And here it is. This is generally the project area that we focused on. And unique to this planning effort, we didn't focus in on one of the station area aspects. We actually went through a framework plan set and design guide elements that would capture both a North Station location, where if it were to land there, as well as a South Station location. So, and tonight I'll walk through each of those. There's subtle differences between the North and Station location, but generally around the perimeter, a lot of the connectivity and land use elements are quite the same. The big goals for the planning effort, really to help establish that vehicle for meaningful communication, and this is between the city, the surrounding neighborhood residents, property owners within that area, any other agencies that are intermixed with that, Watershed District, for example, helping to understand how this area can evolve over time. We also wanted to try to provide as much input as we can to the preliminary engineering components as well as the TSAP kind of day one planning that was going on. And there's been ongoing coordination between our effort and the TSAP planning effort throughout this process. Ultimately, articulate that desired framework and kind of vision for the land uses in the area, how the redevelopment kind of looks or is shaped by transportation improvements and connectivity improvements, primarily streets. New streets in the area, existing streets in the area, and then the new rail line, if it were to be the south location, some of the freight rail lines that come into play as well. And all of this leading to kind of a unified vision for the overall district. There's 3 segments to this plan. We kind of wanted to provide a little bit of orientation on the front end with a context component, so a little bit of the existing conditions, what's out there today, what maybe are some of the hurdles to redevelopment that's out there. We also wanted to guide that with some precedent research that we did of other more medical office-related districts that are nearby transit. So we took that information and tried to help us guide that. I think you've seen that at earlier work sessions. We use that to help formulate key takeaways about how to get people from that station into the medical kind of employment district, what are some of the amenities that are a part of that, all those pieces we wanted to pull into the context component. The second piece is the framework, and that's a series of kind of diagrams that are broken out into a framework of access and circulation, land use and development, parks and open space, and we kind of concluded that with an illustrative master plan that just kind of generally highlights maybe where the building placement could be, how parking's integrated with that, and all that's really the formulation of more detailed vision and guiding principles kind of on that next tier below the comprehensive plan, more specific to that sub-area. And lastly, the design guidelines element. Again, looking at more detail of the actual access and circulation, land use and development, and parks and open space in a design guideline sense. There's been a vision that was articulated as a part of this project for the station area. I'm not going to read through all of this, but generally to focus this as more of an employment center. We've got the large anchor of Methodist Hospital in that area. Really try to create more of a jobs-focused area, not that it would exclude residential. That could be a part, a very small component of it. Also want to have office and service uses within that area as well. A healthcare wellness district as kind of the overall theme for the area. Introduce new transit-oriented streets, and what we mean by that is breaking down the big grid of streets that's out there. There's very large blocks of land. It's very difficult to navigate for pedestrians as they get to the station. Having that component is a key element to the success of the transformation of the district, along with creating a really strong connection from the existing front door of the hospital today at the cancer center all the way up to the station. Thinking about that, coordinating that with the day one elements of TSAP and how that can evolve over time with redevelopment. Also, really leveraging the open space amenities along the creek in that area and really trying to create a unique identity for the whole station area at Louisiana. We set up kind of a broad umbrella of kind of 10 guiding principles. These are kind of the benchmarks to evaluate projects and proposals on as things go forward. I would note two things specific. I think you've seen these before at a work session. My colleague Jeff Miller had presented these, but one of the more primary ones was to kind of create a more safe and convenient atmosphere around that station area, and that was talked about early on, as well as really creating that strong connection for the surrounding neighborhoods to get through the redevelopment area and to the station. So we really wanted to play those up as a part of the guiding principles. You can see other components here about transit-oriented development focus, managing parking in that area, and really creating a network of complete streets. So I'm going to talk quickly about the framework plans. I'll go through a north station and then a south station. This will be a series of diagrams that will kind of build on one another. We'll start with access and circulation, then land use and development, parks and open space as we go through these. To begin with the north station, just for orientation's sake, Louisiana running at a kind of a diagonal north to south through here, the existing rail line and Cedar Lake Trail running right in this location. There's a series of kind of new elements that are integrated into this. You can see the existing, the planned North Station platform, the planned park and ride area as a part of that. We're talking about integrating kind of a transit plaza with that, and also a set of new streets to kind of create a loop and make more of a development scale block in that area to introduce more of the office medical uses within that. One of the key elements to that is creating a pedestrian street that would connect the west side of the platform down to Louisiana Circle into the front door of the hospital in the near term, but maybe possibly a hospital expansion that could grow to the north, shortening that distance for connection. The yellow dots represent some opportunities for gateway features. The two bridges, the bridge over the creek is planned for reconstruction in the next few years in the CIP. And also we got the freight rail bridge, and with the North Station there would be a new LRT bridge constructed. Those could provide great gateway aspects into the overall district here on the north side. As far as the bike and ped network, you can see a whole network of additional sidewalks and trails, primarily right in the core where we've got new streets. We're also adding new sidewalks, new bike facilities in that area. So there's a lot of new park and trail components that all tie back to the Cedar Lake Trail here. Two elements I'd like to highlight on here, again, that pedestrian street that would connect north to south between the hospital, as well as the transformation of the switching line now into a kind of a recreational and maybe a secondary pedestrian circulation to the station area and to the Cedar Lake Trail that would serve the Brooklawn and the Elmwood neighborhood. Another component to that is looking at potential either relocation of this bridge or a secondary bridge that would provide the access for the Meadowbrook neighborhood on a more direct route to the station in that area. Here's a detail. We went into a little bit more depth on that hospital connection. So you can see Louisiana Circle here on the south. That's the existing curvature of the roadway. Existing Oxford Street right in through here, and the planned LRT platform. So looking at either end of the platform, the west end here or the east end here, the west side is the idea of creating that pedestrian street connection. Really kind of a 50-foot right-of-way area, high amenity zone that connects people across that distance, maybe potentially to a new hospital building, and that could be integrated with either a Skyway connection or internal circulation. Again, as this transfers over time, we want to create that great walk for people to get from the station to the hospital. Secondly, on that also, that switching wide trail you can see connecting up on a realigned Edgewood Avenue back up to the station platform there as well. Generally, land use and development character in the area. Again, here's the LRT trail in that zone. Primarily an office, kind of medical focus in that area. The hatch represents the opportunity for potentially ground level commercial areas, more associated with Louisiana Avenue, to have that visibility, to have the kind of retail succeed with that visibility of Louisiana Avenue. But the alignment we've kind of discerned here really times out with what the business park zoning standards would be. So beyond that then, there's areas of industrial. We're talking about potential redevelopment areas in the darker and maybe more reinvestment where the buildings would stay, maybe property owners continue to reinvest in those over time. Sam's Club is the large area here, is more of that highway retail character, and we're looking at kind of the lower intensity office and light industrial uses in the pink beyond that. Parks and open space, again, just to highlight, we've got a series of opportunities for stormwater treatment in that area, again, the switching wide trail, and really trying to leverage connectivity to the Minnehaha Creek open space area with the new trails that are integrated in that stretch. The illustrative plan. We did one for each, the north and the south station. What we wanted to do was try to articulate how the buildings could actually kind of fit on the site, think about how they're parked within that. So we did a little bit of analysis on what's the size of the building, what's the square footage, how is it parked in that area, to let that be the guide for how that can kind of evolve over time. We were working with staff on kind of developing those areas, but a lot of the framework, all the elements that you see here are really driven by either the underlying property lines that are out there today, existing ownership or existing right-of-way and streets, and then how the north or the rail line would come into play here again with the freight rail line and the station platform right in that stretch. So maybe opportunities for ground level commercial areas, primarily that medical office focus right in the core, more of the industrial areas on the edges, and then that opportunity for office and some lighter industrial uses up to the north. So just to get more in detail on the north station, I'll try to go a little quicker here on the south. The big change is that you can see the LRT alignment now swoops down in along portions of the old switching line. I think today it runs on an alignment generally like this, as well as back up to the north. So the station would be located immediately to the east of Louisiana, with the park and ride in its same configuration as the north area up against the freight rail tracks. So the same principles of adding new pedestrian scaled streets and blocks in the area, as well as a pedestrian street area segment that would connect to the hospital are still in play. It's just a smaller component of that for the south station. Again, gateway features and opportunities for that with new streets. I think the big difference here with the park or the bike and ped network is now the switching wide trail that we've talked about in the north concept extends kind of along the existing configuration right past the transit area and the station, and then can connect more directly to the open space amenity along the creek. I think that's the most significant change with the open space. Again, you can see the number of new sidewalks and trails within the core area of the framework plan. And again, more detail on how that could interact with the LRT platform. Transit plaza above, the potential for maybe a mixed use, kind of a ground level commercial component, office above that, with an extension straight across the east side of the platform down to an expanded hospital area in that location. Here's that switching wide trail connecting to the station and then across Louisiana, the open space. We also started to do some street sections, and I'll talk about that when we get to the design guidelines for how all those components kind of fit together, because streets and the kind of the trail connectivity are the big pieces to think about going forward. Again, land use development is generally the same. Hospital, medical district, primarily office. The driver here is the alignment of the rail line. We've got ground level commercial opportunities, again, transit platform, park and ride here. Similar, but the subtleties of where the station location drives the small change. Again, the opportunity for open space amenities here, the switching wide trail, really leveraging Louisiana as a strong connection for pedestrian and bikes, one of the only north-south connections in the city. The illustrative plan, again, looks to highlight primarily office uses, mixed uses along Louisiana, really turn Louisiana into a great street, buildings closer to the street with pedestrian amenities on it. Focused development right around the station and a proposed kind of open water amenity where the wetland is today. Again, industrial uses on kind of flank that area of office use with the areas to the north. The design guidelines segment, broken into three classifications on access and circulation, land use and development standards, kind of building and site, as well as the parks and open space components. I'll touch briefly on some of the design guidelines pieces here. The overview is really what's listed here in the bullet components. But the focus of that, I think, for the access and circulation was on those two elements, the streetscape typologies and the representative street sections. We really spent a lot of time using those as the vehicles, maybe to help inform the form-based code as that comes online, but the integration of the building face to the street, how are all those components integrated with one another? I'll talk about those here next. So we touched a little bit on the walk-bike network, integrating dedicated bicycle lanes for commuters in that area, sidewalk components separated from a street, for example, in Louisiana Avenue. All the facilities we need around the transit station, bicycle parking, bike lockers, the kiss and ride drop-off, all those elements. Enhanced signage not only for kind of the district identity here, but maybe also integrating that along the recreational corridors for the trail components that tie back to Minnehaha Creek or the Cedar Lake Trail. This was one element. It's for the North Station here, but we kind of color-coded all the different street types that are in the area, and that's based on the right-of-way width that's out there today, the intended use or the type of building that would be against that. So we've broken down each of those framework plans for the North and South Station into street typology maps that are then keyed to representative sections for each of the areas. And we worked with staff and engineering staff to help kind of guide how they could look. So in the upper left here, an example of what Louisiana Avenue could look like over time. More of the office uses kind of flanking the street on either side, pedestrian walkway, dedicated bicycle lane separated from vehicular traffic. It would still need 4 lanes through there, and also a dedicated turn lane at larger intersections. All the way down to the detail of the pedestrian street, that corridor with a high amenity area to get people from the station down to Methodist Hospital, all the elements that are integrated within that. We even talked about the opportunity for kind of electric vehicles to help shuttle patients back and forth from the hospital to the platform as well. But a number of different elements were a part of that. We also touched on land use and development, particularly broke it into the site components as well as the buildings. And that included everything from landscaping, lighting, service, and delivery areas, all the way to kind of parking and utility components, as well as on-site stormwater treatment. The buildings, we really focused on, how is the building situated on a site or adjacent to the street? What's the intended height and the massing of it? How is it broken up? It's not just one large wall. There should be articulation of the building facade. What are some of the materials of that, and also some of the energy efficiency pieces, if there's passive solar heating components, if there's additional green roof opportunities to aid in stormwater treatment. So we talked a lot about the building height and massing, making sure we articulate entries, maybe step back, second levels or third levels of the buildings. You can see articulated entries here again. Really a variation on the facade and the form of the building. Having the ability to potentially set the building back 10 feet from the right-of-way as the business park guidelines intend. Opportunities for green roof components and exterior materials that might be a little bit more contemporary, more metal, a little bit more of the glass components. How do those all work with the building form of the existing business park architectural standards. We looked into that, as well as the park and open space components. You know, what components, can we have some community gathering areas? The advisory committee really thought the Transit Plaza was an opportunity to help create some of those community gathering spaces and really help that frame development, as it's showing in this photo. Development right around a nice confined Transit Plaza area, potentially, if retail isn't so successful back at the North Station off of Louisiana, maybe bringing in the kind of opportunity for food trucks or some kind of temporal retailer that could be there, 11 to 1 on Thursdays, or allowing that space to happen, including additional areas for building plazas. And then we also want to integrate stormwater management. Really, the streets, we think, are great vehicles for introducing additional stormwater treatment to help alleviate some of the strain of stormwater running into Minnehaha Creek. Also treating it as an amenity area. If there's a overlook component, boardwalk elements that are already there, with Methodist Hospital, how can we continue that idea throughout the station area? Also integrating public art, whether they're kind of temporary installations in larger plaza areas, or if we integrate that into the pedestrian features on the street, the bicycle parking components, the bus shelters. All those components can help do the identified district brand as well as the gateway features. So that's all. Very quick overview. I don't know how I did on time. Probably a little long. Sorry,
That's
Sean.
fine.
But I'm here for questions.
Okay, I do have one blue card here from somebody. I know we'll need to separate these out for votes, but let me ask for public commentary on all three of them, because we've kind of lumped them together. Does anybody want to make any comments about this at all, or ask questions at all for anybody? Yeah, come on up.
Larry Jones, 82 16th 30th and a half Street, number 211.
You don't have to keep doing that, we got you.
Okay. Just for the purpose of the record, I do it. I was just wondering, what the difference would be allowed between mixed use and the new business park designation. What would be allowed in terms of residential, commercial, and office? I think those are the key elements, along with sidewalks and bikeways.
Okay.
I'll try to respond to that, and tell me if I'm not directly responding. I can help with that too. The mixed-use district, the business park district, and also this plan has really been focused on kind of the employment base, so office, commercial, and some industrial as well, and ways that those could intensify. And so opening up for additional uses within those, kind of getting away from 90% warehouse buildings, and really looking at more jobs based that will help drive the ridership on the LRT line and take advantage of that investment. As far as residential, this area has been sort of a struggle for residential. We did consider some earlier options for industrial, maybe for residential along the creek. And I don't think we're going to close the door to opportunities for residential, but I think this area is a bit more challenging for implementing residential as a mixed use in the vicinity. Now, on the fringes of this development, I think there's certainly opportunities for that. We do come up near South Oak Hill neighborhood. There's some sites there that might lend themselves to some development in that area. And who knows what the future is. We also have Meadowbrook Manor, which is important affordable housing in the area, but it's market rate, and it's aging, and so there might be opportunities there for new development to happen within that as well.
Okay, just a few comments. I would really encourage the council. I looked at the map that was proposed, and I would just really encourage the council to include more mixed-use development. I feel there's a need for a lot of bikeways and trails, and office is definitely needed, but I think there's residential, particularly Section 8 and assisted living for seniors. These are the types of people who use rail, could use the line, and these are the people who don't drive cars. I think it's something that's very needed. Also, I'd like to say that it's very important. I've seen in some cities where their comprehensive plans don't match their zoning, and I would urge the council to avoid that at all possibilities, because you lose grant funding and revenue from other governmental agencies. So that sums up what I have to say. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. Okay, let's take these in order. Let's go with item 8B, which is the motion to accept the Louisiana Station Area Framework. Now, we're not actually, approving it, we're just accepting the report, is correct? Let me ask, any comment about that, yeah? And then
Yeah.
we'll see.
I had a couple comments. Forgive my laryngitis here. One is, I just wanted to publicly thank and acknowledge the residents that were involved in this planning process. It was a lot of time, and when I look at the folks that were involved, it's folks that have been involved in this community and really understand it. And so we can't do this work without them, and I just want to acknowledge that work. Also want to just clarify, we are not choosing a north or south orientation, that this is really laying out either option, and there's a lot of other factors in play right now that may further influence which option, but I just wanted to clarify that as well. My last comment is, I was wondering from staff, we've had some conversations about how we might partner with Park Nicollet Methodist in general. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what conversations you've had already with them and sort of what that vision might be. Because I know when I look at this, clearly we could have a platform in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we could have a platform out there, or we could partner and do some public-private partnership development that could incorporate where the platform is and really work it into what you're describing as these public places that are much more engaging. But I don't know how far along we are in those
You can give
conversations.
us an update on that, if any.
I'll do my best to kind of
So first, then you, Jake.
to try to characterize that. They've certainly been very engaged. Bob Risselman and Dwayne Spiegel have both been involved with the advisory committee. We've had some separate meetings with them. They're also involved with the business partnership as well. That's not the right term, but they are supportive of the project, LRT project. They've been involved in this process. They do see the value in having an LRT station in the area. I think the piece that we're still kind of working through is the level of, there's certainly going to be a ridership improvement for hospital employees or visitors or what have you, if it's at a South Station. Regionally, though, the numbers are showing that it's more of a wash because it does add some time as well for ridership along the entire line. So while there is certainly benefit to the hospital and the ridership at the hospital as a whole on the line, the project office hasn't seen as much value in the South Station as the North Station, and that's why the North Station is on the base plan, and the South Station is still included as a betterment. So I think we're still exploring those ideas with them, but no commitments at this point really from the hospital about trying to make the South Station happen.
Well, if I could just follow up on that I think it's important for this station, but really for all our stations, that really looking at how do we partner with business on these, because I think there's room for some really creative, dynamic places that we will be creating, but we can't do it alone. And we need to have these partners, and I know last week as a council, we looked at one proposal for the Wooddale Station that could be a very creative proposal. And I just want to encourage staff to continue those conversations in general in those public-private partnerships.
See what's going to happen, then we'll go to Jake. Go ahead.
No, Ann asked my question.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I guess we're going to Jake now.
Ann's just that efficient.
Yes, well, that's it, yeah. It's the Vulcan mind.
But not
melting.
so efficient, she took mine. I have an observation and two questions. One is, I recently saw a presentation on the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, and I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, but a number of the elements that were involved in this, that I saw in this presentation, were integrated into that, particularly as it related to bike, pedestrian, and Sue Santa's favorite subject, stormwater management. And really effective, creative ways of creating places that people wanted to be. And I wrote down, as I was listening to this, I wrote down a quote from one of the Indianapolis residents. And it struck me because we talk often about, St. Louis Park, sort of doesn't have a downtown, a traditional downtown that people would normally think of. And this person said, and this is what struck me, she said, Indianapolis lacks a downtown/neighborhood feel, and this project has changed a lot of that. And really what it was about safely and effectively moving traffic, bikes, and pedestrians, and from that, and managing stormwater issues, and from that was this tremendous sense of sort of community place, businesses springing up, people feeling an attachment to that area. So I would just encourage staff to maybe take a look at the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. It was not inexpensive, and I understand that. But they partnered with the federal government and some private entities to pull the money together, and it might be something worth looking into. The first of the two questions that I have is, you mentioned design guidelines. And I'm asking this question because it has come up in the past, and I just want for clarity. I think I know the answer. Are these design guidelines seen as general guidelines and rules of thumb, or are they very deliberate, prescriptive rules, hard rules? And the reason I ask is, as my colleagues will know, when the Elliott School project came up, there was a lot of confusion between the neighborhood and the developer over, were design guidelines hard rules, or were they general guidelines to follow? So I'm just curious. I want us all to be on the same page when we hear you talking about design guidelines, because that comes with some baggage for this council.
Understood. And yes, Councilmember Spano, these are advisory at this stage. At this level of the documentation, it's an advisory, it's goals, it gives you an image of what we're trying to create. The zoning, of course, the business park zoning, for instance, is going to implement some of the pieces of this, and they're complementary. However, I think the form-based code is an opportunity for you to actually start codifying some of these design issues that we're right now discussing and saying, this is sort of what we're looking for, and we're going to evaluate projects against that, but it's not a rule that you must follow.
Right.
I think the form-based code is one tool or one approach to start to formalize that and maybe add some more stricter adherence to that for developments.
Well, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that as we were talking about it, we were all on the same page. The last thing is a question, or an observation and a question, I guess, is I'm curious. I know that when this came before us before, I raised the issue that no one from the Meadowbrook neighborhood was on the advisory committee, and I know you guys made an effort to reach out to that community. I know that that happened, and I see in the report that you had specific meetings with that neighborhood, and I thank you for that. I'm curious about what input they had, because what was striking to me is almost all of the development opportunities appear to be on the east side of Louisiana, and I don't see, and I may have missed something, but it seemed to me that the discussion about pedestrian ways and connections from the LRT trail or the LRT station, obviously down to the hospital, but I didn't see anything going west. And I want to make sure that, two things, that Meadowbrook is one of the best naturally occurring affordable housing pieces of property that exist in the city, and I don't want Louisiana to become a Berlin Wall or a barrier, or however you want to refer to it, that keeps people from realizing those opportunities on both sides of that street. So that's my question, is sort of what input did Meadowbrook have as you were discussing that?
Well, I'll try to capture a couple of the high points that I pulled away from that. One is there was excitement about the idea that pedestrian improvements and bike improvements along Louisiana might be considered as part of this planning. Second, the Minnehaha Creek trails that are even moving toward implementation at this stage, were a lot of excitement generated around that. As far as and then also LRT, the idea of that service, people were pleased with that idea. As far as uses specifically, there actually wasn't a lot of input that, we were on the wrong track, for instance. Some pointed questions that I was trying to draw and ask from were, what services are there that aren't in the area that you would like to see in the area? And again, not a whole lot of strong feedback on those particular items. That actually, the advisory group, some of the folks from South Oak Hill were a little stronger on that to say, yes, some convenience retail that serves those businesses, fine, but we really want that also to be something that will draw us in the surrounding neighborhoods to come to this area. I mean, right now we have the opportunity to go to Knollwood, but we have to cross Highway 7. This is could be a much better area. But some of the things that were come up that actually specifically came up during the meeting might be contrary to a lot of the things that we are talking about here. One conversation about, a Walmart would be great. and I think that's the exact opposite direction that we're really headed for, kind of a pedestrian-friendly, transit-oriented development. But that said, I understood the comment. But the space, I don't think this is the location that we were looking for that. And then, actually, some of the interesting, if you'll give me 1 second, some of the interesting comments from the kids as well. We worked with I think there were about 15 to 20 kids that we worked with. And they were, obviously much more focused on what's happening right next door. So they gave me a lot of comments about the playground at Meadowbrook Manor, although there were some really great comments about connectivity, about bikes, having a place for bikes on the trains, requests for a bigger recycling along the sidewalks and things so that you wouldn't have litter. I mean, there were quite a few kind of interesting comments, and these were kids in the range of, I think, between 6 and 14 or 6 and 12, somewhere in that ballpark. So my favorite comment, if you'll just give me 1 more second, was someone was obviously trying to figure out whether or not they wanted to be a city planner, and asked me what kind of car I drove, and then they said, no thanks. But they totally lost interest at that stage. But
Well, if I can just to close the loop, I'm supportive of the framework, but that sort of stood out to me as something that, and I totally agree with you on the trails and connectivity piece. That was absolutely, you can absolutely see a robust representation on the west side of Louisiana for that, and I think that is great. I just want to make sure that those commercial opportunities are there so that we don't sort of have a situation where it looks like one side of the street is, fixed up and done, lots of activity and development, and the other side's not getting that. That's important.
Gotcha.
Okay, yeah, Julie?
Thank you, Jake, for being almost all-knowing here. I know a while back, and we did talk about this a while back, and thank you for bringing up accessibility for Meadowbrook, because we did talk about that, and in fact, you talked about the trail, and there were two things that came to mind out of that discussion. I think it was about a month ago. One, that the trail would probably not be real accessible in winter. And the other part was kind of the safety around the trail. So, as you mentioned that, it's certainly an option, but I don't think it can always be our go-to for moving people from the collaborative over to the station. So I do think we need to focus on other options, streets or what have you, for moving folks over to the newer area. The other thing the question that came up, is when we look at the south design, it kind of appeared to me, and I'm not sure, did it eliminate the potential for expanding the hospital and maybe some of the development if they moved it south, so it would decrease the development opportunities? Can you just speak to that just a little bit?
Well, I'll take it first, and Brian
Okay,
can
thanks.
add if you'd like. It doesn't eliminate the opportunities for hospital expansion. I think it does, however, start to reduce the square footage or acreage for individual parcels. So because now the light rail line is running through there, that does eat up some land, some square footage. So. I actually have tables that spelled out specifically. I'm going to lean on Brian to see if he can recall kind of the degree of that difference.
Thank you.
I'd say roughly about an acre to a half acre at the most would be the differential between the north and the south station. But that's just really predicated
That's pretty
on,
minor.
yeah, predicated on the street connectivity that's in there. And as Sean said, this really is the kind of the threshold with the light rail line coming down, and then their property line is essentially the switching line right in there today. So in the south station, it's about their existing property. In the north station, it would extend a little bit further north to where the street would come into the district right in there. So a slight increase, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, is there a motion on this item? This is on 8B. the
I would move
report.
approval.
Second.
Seconded? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.